It's an honor to be here, and such a huge pleasure. I don't have any very systematic list of topics that I want to address, and I know that David will follow up with a more comprehensive discussion or presentation of the work and the structure and really the broad vision of this Center for Contemplative Sciences. And so I will leave that to him. So instead, I think I would like to address or cover a few different topics and thoughts, which I hope will provoke conversation and thought as we, within the confines of this broader topic. Let me say first of all that I guess I entered academia as a graduate student like everybody here, and I taught for several years as a TA, and then I finished my PhD in 2009, and since then taught a fair bit at Seton Hall at Columbia. And in all that time, in spite of my sense that there had to be a better way to do teaching, and that there might be some, that an ideal would be to integrate contemplative practice into a course, the bread and butter courses of a religion studies department, traditions of Buddhism or Hinduism. I personally have so far failed to do it completely, and I don't have any immediate, I consider this to be really what I'm working on now. I'm very fascinated by, and so this is a great, exciting opportunity for me to discover, along, I hope, with many of my colleagues and with the students here. So allow me to be slightly unsystematic and link together a couple of what I think for me are very motivating and important topics. The first is simply following up on Dorothy's wonderful talk just now and commenting on how there is, I think this is the correct, and not at all jargony, but because it's so precise, that there really is an alternative epistemology that comes to bear on a contemplative mode of learning. And I think that the distinction that she drew, or some of the language she used, was the difference between covering material, which has been the standard totalizing mandate to know everything within a given topic, and opposing that to a separate, but not necessarily mutually exclusive, but a different mode of approach to learning, which is a contemplative mode, which is where the scholar, the inquirer, the learner is open and attentive to the material. And considering these as alternative epistemologies, I think, is very apt and important. And I was then, that immediately resonated for me as connecting to Professor Chopin's opening up remarks and his call to approach material and allow it to say what it has to say, and allowing the scholar, the individual, to be moved and changed in whatever way the data requires. So there's a certain, and these are subtle differences, and yet they're very fundamentally crucial. Even, of course, with what Dorothy's describing in the undergraduate approach to teaching literature, for example, but possibly at all levels of education. The ideals that we have for, in a sense, the very mandate, the very mission of liberal arts education, which I feel is most appropriately captured in this spirit of what we're now calling a contemplative approach. An approach where the topic at hand, the data at hand, is presupposed to say something of great value, and that it is necessary that we come to it and be moved and changed by it in some way. And in a sense, this would be appropriate to think about the origins of even the notion of liberal arts education, the Florentine Renaissance approaching their antiquity and seeing how the approach to learning about another foreign culture, ancient culture that was alien to them and yet they believed was possibly superior and at least enriching to them and would make a difference in their lives to learn about. Those are just a few random thoughts I wanted to share, but I think that the key linkage there is the notion of openness to being transformed by something of great value in the academic enterprise. When this is applied to children's education, which is one of the main interests in the center, or that we'll be working on going forward in the Contemplative Sciences Center, this becomes of self-evident value. Because, and I now want to go into a slightly different direction and give you a little overview of one of the projects that the center is already involved in. It may not be felt to have a very big impact here yet, because this is a project that's taking place in a school district in Southern California. But I do hope, and we have reason to expect, that it will be a model that can be scaled to other locations, and hopefully we'll start to see K through 12 education projects of a similar type that are taking place here locally. It just hasn't actually happened yet, but it's starting to happen. So what I'm sharing here with you now, we don't have to go through the whole thing by any means. And before we do, let me explain to you where this is coming from. The overall picture is a foundation in Southern California had partnered with a school district, and this is the Encinitas School District of about 10 schools, a fairly diverse economic background for these kids. 3 of them apparently technical language, I guess Title I schools, meaning that 80% or more of the kids were on free and reduced lunches. And then there are other wealthy communities within this area as well. The intervention that was proposed and facilitated through the foundation was to, in lieu of a physical education program, that they would be bringing in an Ashtanga yoga-based practice program. All of the teachers trained for this intervention were themselves of varying backgrounds. Some of them were educators, some of them were therapists, some of them were just gym-trained yoga teachers. But their main orientation to the yoga was as a transformative mode of practice and focus in order to develop personal focus and attention through body and breath particularly, and also just simply relaxation. And although mindfulness has not been an important anchoring term in that particular project here, in that project the anchoring term was, or the tradition that they were basing the intervention on was a Hatha Yoga one, and not a Buddhist-based one per se. What I wanted to share with you here is how, in a sense, that the contemplative mode and how what tradition it's coming from may not be of the essential part so much as an ability to go extract and identify and distill some of the basic structural elements of the practice tradition itself, and to see how that could be a basis for transformation of the entire school culture, which is really the project in Southern California, what they are actually hoping to achieve. with of course, the support of the administrators and the principals, because they're all excited about this. So the basic idea is that these are all elementary schools, by the way. These are 1st through 6th grade. 10 separate institutions, and within the funding that's been provided, each group or each class will be practicing an hour of yoga, whatever that means, depending, because 1st graders doing yoga may be a very different thing than 6th graders doing yoga, 3 to 6 times a week. And then ultimately with the hope that that would start to engage the faculty and administration as well. So one of the projects that I've been continuing to work on with them, this foundation, I haven't finished the story, the foundation in Southern California then has aligned itself with a set of researchers in the University of San Diego, and then secondarily connected with the center here at UVA and our partnerships with the Curry School in order to create a long-term protocol for evaluating the effectiveness of or the impact of this intervention in the schools. And it's such a remarkable and actually, I think, unprecedented type of study, specifically with a Hatha Yoga-based practice model, simply because people in mindfulness, that probably has been done, although I don't know with an entire school district if that's been done. In this case, we have the benefit of it being an entire school district. So what I have helped them to create, as you can see here, is the beginnings of a template for looking at the classical yoga model. Those of you who are not at all familiar, I'll give you the quick overview that Patanjali, this is the author of a Sanskrit treatise on yoga, and is often credited with being sort of the definitive classical yoga. Obviously, Patanjali could have been as early as 300 BC, more likely about 300 AD. Undoubtedly, it was a Brahminical author, but undoubtedly heavily influenced by his Buddhist contemporaries and his ideas about psychology, mental and physical transformation, profoundly influenced by his contemporaries in the Buddhist field. At this point, the kind of yoga interventions that are being instituted at these schools are, as we say, they're based in Ashtanga yoga, but the sense in which they are Ashtanga yoga is more indicative of the fact that this is a tradition that has been modified for general use within the 20th century by a couple of South Indian practitioners and masters who then subsequently popularized the practice outside of India internationally. But what we've done here is gone back to the 2,000-year-old treatise and extracted what Patanjali, the author, whoever Patanjali was, a set of 8 practical principles of transformation which are essential to yoga practice, which constitute the yoga practice. And there's a lot to be said about how these map onto similar and in fact identical transformative modalities in the Buddhist tradition and the Eightfold Path, but I won't get distracted with that here. That would take a long time. But suffice it to say that Patanjali's 8 limbs are, in a sense, effectively identical to the Buddhist program in terms of the transformation of the individual by the engagement of their body, speech, and mind, and disciplining them under certain circumstances to create a different intentional being that has certain qualities of resilience and compassion and so forth. So in any case, this is a little bit of just a scratch at the surface to see what that might look like as it then penetrates the broader curriculum of an elementary school. So in these schools in Southern California, they're very fortunate to all have gardens. So they're all very interested in a culinary project, which in their individual schools involves the kids working in their own respective gardens, they all then have an experience of bringing food to their kitchens, which they see that whole process, and including that, of course, which is a wonderful, adjunct tool. Not necessary, it might not be there in one case. In this particular set of schools, they have that advantage. So working, if you look at this, and we'll scroll through it quickly, you can see how the limb, it's okay, I'll just shout. What we have over here is the list of 8 limbs of Patanjali. The first one is the limb Yama, which are effectively universal moral guidelines. They include Yama and Yamasana. So Yama have to do with essentially the way the individual engages with others. And so the subcategories of Yama are commitment to truthfulness, commitment to non-harming, the famous ahimsa, satya. These are the Sanskrit terms which simply refer to guidelines for ethical behavior. And so we just map those out in different categories, which you can see for yourself. I'd be happy to share this with people if they're interested, to see how that could easily translate into the experience of even an elementary school, whether or not this exact language would be used. And also, of course, this is for the educators. I mean, primarily it is for the educators. Could we slide down? Yeah. You can take one or look at one or another. We have niyama, which is the guidelines for self-awareness. So that the next one. Now, asana is one I thought I would just dwell on for a moment, having to do with, this is the postural limb of the yoga practice program as articulated in Patanjali. And the sage Patanjali and even his commentarial tradition give very little attention to this, but they just sort of take it for, I think there are maximum 2 sutras that have anything to do with asana, which you self-evidently can view a little bit out of touch with perhaps today's modern fascination with yoga and postural yoga. But be that as it may, it is still considered one of the core elements of the personal training regime. And here the exploit, as we distribute this throughout the various skill sets that are trying to, that the instructors are working with their students, which could be conceivably in any different curricular subdivision. So, of course, at the beginning of a math class, the necessity for gaining, for the children to be focused and present will be as important as in any other class. But these are then become, whether it becomes appropriate to use the actual language, or whether it becomes just an opportunity for exploring how that semantic range of, for example, the seat and developing a strong and powerful and steady seat has other terms in other cultural spheres, which could be an opportunity to explore cross-culturally as well. Finally, I won't go through all 8 of them, but I'd be happy to share this with anybody who wants to take a look. I want to just give you a sense of that's some part of a project going on with in elementary education. And to conclude, I want to suggest that, going back to how Dorothy said, this contemplative modes of education do engage fundamentally an epistemology which is different than that of mastery of knowledge in a certain sense, because it requires the ability to be changed. And this is a vast topic, but as we are partnering with our different our colleagues in the schools of education and medical sciences, it's clear that both in terms of vocational training and also in our abilities to face some of the more intractable problems of in caring for children, for example, who are coming from very traumatized backgrounds, that we have an enormous amount, or dealing with patients who have experienced traumatic brain injury or themselves have experienced PTSD. There are enormous therapeutic possibilities, but that's, I think, I wouldn't say less important, but on an equal importance with considering, as Dorothy pointed out, that the fundamental project of the liberal arts education is deeply and fundamentally compatible with our with this alternative epistemology of learning, and the great strength and potential and the exciting project ahead for the Center for Campbell Sciences is precisely in harnessing the humanities with the medical and health sciences and education schools, because it is precisely, especially scholars in this realm, in the humanities, who have been deeply attentive to the particular sets of knowledge systems which model the ability to be transformed by the material. And I'll leave it at that. I know that's not terribly precise, but I'm just excited to share some of that with you, and I look forward to hearing more questions.